The ship was a dying beast around her. Alara could feel its pain in the shuddering groan of the deck plates, a vibration that traveled up through the soles of her boots and into her bones. The Starlight's lament had been her home for 5 long years, a Valyrian freighter that had seen better decades. Now, with a cracked drive conduit and life support failing, it was a coffin drifting in the black. The captain's voice, usually so steady, was frayed at the edges as it came over the comms. All hands, brace for emergency docking. The outpost is our only hope. Alara had little use for the word. She peered through the grimy viewport as the station came into view. It wasn't a gleaming spire of metal and light like the core worlds boasted. It was something else entirely, a cluster of massive, organic-looking spheres intertwined with vines of what seemed to be glowing vegetation, all nestled within a carefully sculpted asteroid. It looked less like a station and more like a garden that had learned to defy the void. Primitive, she muttered to herself, turning away. We've come all this way to beg from farmers. The air in the docking bay was different. It wasn't the sterile, recycled stuff of the lament. It was thick, humid, and alive with the scent of damp soil, blooming flowers, and something else. Something green and vital she couldn't name. The people who greeted them were not in uniforms, but in practical, comfortable clothes stained with earth and water. They looked healthy, calm, their eyes curious, but without a trace of fear. The captain, a weary man named Ilya, was already speaking with the outpost's leader. We are grateful for your assistance. We need duranium sheeting, plasma conduits. The outpost leader, a woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, smiled gently. We have something better. My name is Anya. Welcome to Viridia. We'll share our bread, our knowledge, and our strength. But first, let's see to your wounded ship. She turned to Julian, our head horticulturist. He will assist your specialist. A man stepped forward. He was tall, with quiet eyes the color of rich soil and hands that looked both strong and gentle. He wore a simple tunic, and a small, flowering vine was tucked behind his ear, its petals a soft, luminescent blue. This was Julian. He didn't look like an engineer. He looked like he'd just walked out of a forest. Horticulturist. Alara couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. With all due respect, our drive is cracked. We don't need a gardener. Julian's gaze met hers, and he didn't flinch. He simply looked at her, really looked, and she had the unnerving feeling he was seeing more than just her cynical exterior. He saw the tiredness she carried like a shield. All life needs a gardener, in one way or another, he said, his voice as calm and steady as the deep earth. Your ship is a living system, is it not? It breathes, it consumes, it grows weary. I am here to help it heal. Anya nodded. Alara, is it? Our bioscans show your botany bay took damage. Julian's expertise may be more relevant than you think. Please accompany him. Frustrated but obedient, Alara fell into step beside Julian as he led her away from the docking bay. They walked through archways that weren't carved but seemed to have been grown. The walls a lattice of living wood that pulsed with a soft, internal light. They entered one of the massive spheres, and Alara stopped dead. It was a forest. A real, breathing forest under a vast, domed ceiling that simulated a blue sky. The air hummed with insects, and the sound of a trickling stream filled the silence. Trees she didn't recognize reached for the artificial sun, their leaves broad and shimmering. It was more life than she'd seen in one place since leaving her home world. This is impossible, she whispered. It is necessary, Julian corrected softly. These are not just plants. They are our air recyclers, our water purifiers, our primary food source. Some of them, he said, gesturing to a tree with a bark that gleamed like polished metal, form alloys within their structure stronger than duranium. We grow our ship parts here. He led her to a workbench nestled between the roots of a great tree. It was covered with tools, but also with seedlings and data slates showing complex genetic sequences. You carry a burden, he said, not looking at her as he prepared a cup of a steaming, fragrant liquid from a nearby pot, and not just the one your captain gave you. He handed her the cup. It was tea, made from a flower she'd never seen. What would you know about it? She said, her defensiveness rising. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were full of a quiet understanding that disarmed her completely. I know the look of someone who has been running for a long time. Someone who has forgotten what it is to be rooted. He pointed to a small, wilted plant in a ceramic pot she had tucked into her pack, a sprig of starlight bloom. From her lost home. I can help you with that, too, if you let me. Alara looked from the vibrant, impossible forest around her to the dying plant she carried, a symbol of everything she'd lost. She looked at this quiet man who spoke of healing ships and wounded hearts in the same breath. The cynical part of her screamed that this was a fantasy, a temporary respite. But another part, a part she had thought long dead, felt a tiny, fragile spark of that dangerous, foolish thing called hope. She took a sip of the tea. It was warm, and it tasted like coming home. The tea was a revelation. It was warm and floral, with an undertone of something earthy and grounding. As it settled in her stomach, a strange calm began to seep into Alara's bones, quieting the constant, frantic hum of anxiety that had been her companion for years. She looked at Julian over the rim of the clay cup, her skepticism warring with a deep, unexpected curiosity. "You scan our ship and you, red people?" she asked, her voice less sharp than before. A small smile touched his lips. "Not people, life. Everything living speaks a language. Your ship's groans, the rasp of your air filters, the way you hold your shoulders. They all tell a story of exhaustion, of survival without thriving." He gestured to the wilting starlight bloom in her pack. "And that one sings a very sad song indeed." Alara's hand instinctively went to the small pot, her fingers brushing the drooping, silver-speckled leaves. "It's from my homeworld. It's all I have left. It hasn't bloomed since I left. It's lonely," Julian said simply. "And the light on your ship is all wrong. It's missing the specific ultraviolet spectrum it needs to photosynthesize properly. It's slowly starving." He moved to a nearby bench where several young plants were growing under a carefully calibrated light array. He made a slight adjustment to a dial, and the light shifted to a softer, more complex hue. "Here, give it a few hours in this light. It's not a cure, but it's a start." Hesitantly, Alara placed her precious plant beside the others. It looked so small and fragile next to the vibrant viridian flora. The act felt strangely intimate, like trusting a stranger with a deep secret. "Now," Julian said, wiping his hands on his tunic, "show me what you think is broken." He led her deeper into the biodome, not to a sterile engineering bay, but to a section where the very walls seemed to be woven from living, pulsing fibers. Large, pod-like fruits hung from vines, their skins shimmering with a pearlescent sheen. "Your drive conduit," Julian began, "it's not just cracked. It's crystallized, yes. It's losing integrity at a molecular level." Alara stared at him. "How could you possibly know that? Our internal scans barely picked that up." He tapped the wall of the biodome. "We sent a few tendrils of our biosensors to take a look while you were docking. Less invasive than your metallic probes. The data is the same." He reached up and carefully harvested one of the large pods. It was heavier than it looked. "This is a corewood pod. The sap inside, when exposed to a specific energy frequency, hardens into a material with a tensile strength 12 times that of your duranium alloy. And it's self-regenerating, as long as it has a minimal energy source." Alara's mind, trained in conventional mechanics, reeled. "You're suggesting we graft a plant onto our plasma drive?" "I'm suggesting we give your ship a new artery," he corrected gently. "One that can heal itself. Your way is to patch the break. Our way is to teach the break to mend." For the next few hours, they worked. Or rather, Julian worked, and Alara watched, her initial disbelief giving way to a dawning awe. He didn't use welding torches or plasma forges. He used harmonic resonators that hummed at frequencies that made the very air vibrate, and biological catalysts that smelled of rain and honey. He showed her how the Viridian people didn't build. They cultivated. They guided growth. During a quiet moment, as they waited for a polymerizing agent to set, he asked about her home. The question was so unexpected, so devoid of the usual pity or morbid curiosity, that she found herself answering. "It was a desert world," she said, her voice soft. "All red rock and vast skies. The starlight blooms were the only things that grew in the deep canyons. They glowed at night, like they'd trapped the stars in their petals." She looked at her hands. "Then the corporate miners came for the ore beneath the rock. They strip mined the canyons. The blooms died. Everyone left. You didn't. I was the last xenobotanist left. I tried to save a genetic bank, my ship. It was destroyed in an orbital dispute over mining rights. I lost everything. This," she nodded back towards the docking ring, "is all that's left." Julian listened, his silence more comforting than any words of sympathy could have been. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He didn't offer empty platitudes. "We have a saying here," he said after a long moment. "A seed does not fear the dark soil. It trusts the process of becoming. Your plant is not dead, Alara. It is dormant, waiting for the right conditions to remember how to grow." As the artificial sun in the dome began to dim, simulating twilight, Alara checked on her starlight bloom. She gasped. The leaves, which had been limp and pale, had perked up slightly. Their color was a shade deeper, and the silver specks seemed to catch the fading light, glittering with a faint, familiar luminescence. It was a small thing, a tiny victory in a universe of loss. But as she stood there in the quiet, fragrant twilight of the biodome, with this quiet man who spoke the language of growth, it felt monumental. The hard shell around her heart hadn't cracked, but she could feel a hairline fracture, and through it, a sliver of light was finally getting in. The change began subtly, a low, resonant hum that was not part of the station's normal rhythm. The gentle, artificial breeze in the biodome stilled, and the leaves on the trees, which usually rustled with a life of their own, went perfectly quiet. A moment later, a piercing, undulating alarm shattered the peace. Julian's head snapped up, his serene composure replaced by focused intensity. "Solar flare," he said, his voice cutting through the siren's wail. "A big one. We have to move." Before Alara could process this, the station's intercom crackled to life. It was Enya's voice, calm but firm. "All personnel, initiate lockdown protocol Theta. All external operations cease. Secure all biological and mechanical systems. This is not a drill. Captain Ilya, your crew is to remain in the designated safe zones. The storm will last approximately 72 hours. 72 hours, stranded." A fresh wave of claustrophobia washed over Alara, the memory of her cramped, failing ship still too vivid. "We're trapped," she murmured, her hands curling into fists. "We're sheltered," Julian corrected, his hand gently touching her elbow, guiding her away from the dome's center. "There's a difference. Come, we need to get to the core habitation sphere. It's the most heavily shielded." They moved through the now bustling corridors. The Viridians moved with a practiced, unhurried efficiency, securing panels and activating emergency protocols. It was chaos, but it was ordered chaos. They reached the command center, a room that felt more like the heart of a great tree than a bridge, with organic, woven walls and data flowing across living screens of light. Captain Ilya was there, his face a mask of strained patience, standing beside Anya, who was directing her people with quiet authority. "This is an unacceptable delay," Ilya was saying, his voice tight. "Every hour we sit here, the Caltharian raiders get closer. They'll have tracked our trajectory. And if you try to run with a half-healed ship in the middle of a Class 5 solar storm, Captain, the raiders will be the least of your concerns," Anya replied, her gaze never leaving the shimmering data streams that showed the sun's violent tantrum. "Your shields would buckle in minutes. Your crew would be cooked alive. So we just wait to be found?" Ilya's frustration was palpable. "We prepare," Anya said, finally turning to him. Her eyes were not unkind, but they were unwavering. "We use the time you have been given. My engineers tell me your tactical systems are decades out of date. We can help with that. We can't outrun them yet, but perhaps we can make you to Thorny a target to catch." Ilya stared at her, the argument dying on his lips. He was a man used to command, to making the hard choices alone. To be offered a solution, a partnership, was disarming. "What are you proposing?" "A hybrid defense grid," Anya said, pulling up a schematic. "We interface your targeting computers with our bioelectric sensor net. Your range and accuracy will increase by 300%. You'll see them coming long before they see you." For the next 2 days, the station became a hive of collaborative activity. Ilya, the seasoned starfarer, and Anya, the rooted innovator, found a common language in the geometry of defense and the physics of survival. He was amazed by the station's hidden capabilities. The way their sensor net used magnetotactic bacteria in the soil to detect minute gravitational shifts. The way the vines on the station's exterior could release chaff clouds of genetically modified pollen that scrambled targeting systems. He watched Anya work, her hands moving with the same surety whether she was calibrating a plasma conduit or gently directing a climbing plant to better cover a sensor ray. There was a ferocity to her, a deep, unshakable commitment to protecting what was hers. It was a quality he understood intimately, and it stirred something long dormant in him. During a late-night session, surrounded by holographic schematics and the gentle glow of the bioluminescent walls, he found himself telling her about the weight of command, about the faces of the crew he'd lost, the constant calculations of risk and reward that haunted his sleep. You carry it all yourself, Anya observed, handing him a cup of the same fortifying tea Julian had given Alara. As if the burden is yours alone to bear. It is. That's what command is. Or perhaps that is its failure, she said softly. A tree that tries to grow without a forest around it remains a sapling, vulnerable to the first strong wind. You have a crew. You have us now. Let the weight be shared. On the third day, as the solar storm began to subside, Ilya stood with Anya on an observation platform. The star's fury was fading, leaving the void black and serene once more. The upgrades are complete, Anya said. Your ship is not just repaired, Captain. It's been improved. You can leave whenever you wish. Ilya looked out at the starlight's lament, now adorned with subtle, organic-looking filaments that pulsed with a soft light. It was still his ship, but it was something new too, something stronger. He looked at Anya, at the fine lines of worry and wisdom around her eyes, and he knew a truth he had been avoiding. Leaving feels less like an escape now, he admitted, his voice low, and more like a retreat. Anya smiled, a true, warm smile that reached her eyes. Then perhaps you should consider that a retreat is sometimes just the preparation for a greater return. In the quiet that followed, the understanding between them was as solid and real as the deck beneath their feet. The storm had forced them into a shelter, and within its walls, something had taken root. The calm after the solar storm was a tense, brittle thing. The starlight's lament was stronger, yes, humming with a new, organic vitality. But the silence from the void felt more like a predator holding its breath. Cullen, the ship's young communications officer, paced the newly upgraded bridge, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the console. The enhanced sensor net Anya had gifted them was a marvel, a web of bioelectric awareness that stretched further than any of their old tech could dream of. And right now, it was picking up a faint, familiar distortion at the edge of its range. It's them, Cullen said, his voice tight. The Caltharians. They've found us on the main viewer. The data solidified into 3 distinct signatures. Raider corvettes, fast and vicious, their profiles scarred from 100 pillaging runs. The same ones who had crippled them before. Captain Ilya's face was grim. They're faster than us, even with the upgrades. We can't outrun them. Then we fight, a new voice said from the entrance. Sari stood there, leaning against the doorframe as if she owned the place. She was one of Enya's people, a member of the station's defense cadre. She wore practical, form-fitting gear, her dark hair braided tightly back, and a smirk played on her lips that never quite reached her sharp, assessing eyes. She'd been assigned as a liaison for the new systems, but Cullen found her constant, playful confidence deeply irritating. Fight? Cullen scoffed, turning from his console. With what? Your gardening tools? These are Caltharian marauders. They'll board us, carve us up, and sell the pieces. Sari pushed off the doorframe and sauntered onto the bridge, ignoring him to address Ilya. Captain, you have the new sensor net. You see them. They don't know you can. That's your first advantage. She tapped a command into a secondary console, and a holographic map of the asteroid field round Viridius sprang to life. Your second advantage is that they think we're just farmers, aren't you? Cullen shot back. Her smirk widened. Oh, we cultivate things. We're just very particular about our crop, pests included. Her fingers danced across the controls, and the hologram shifted, showing hidden energy signatures nestled within the largest asteroids. We don't have battle cruisers. We have thorns. What happened next was a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. As the Caltharian ships surged forward, confident and aggressive. The asteroid field itself seemed to come alive. What the raiders had written off as mineral deposits were camouflaged railgun emplacements, grown from crystalline formations that now unfolded like deadly flowers. Sari, from her station on the Lament's bridge, coordinated with Viridia's defense grid. Her voice a calm, steady stream of commands. Target their engine nacelles. Their shields are weakest there. Fire the chaff pollen in sequence 3. Now, a cloud of iridescent pollen erupted from several asteroids, engulfing the lead raider. Their targeting systems went haywire, their shots going wild. The Lament's new bioelectric sensors cut through the interference perfectly. Kellen, his initial panic subsiding, found himself working in tandem with her, feeding her targeting data from the ship's perspective. Second raider is breaking off, trying to flank. He called out, "I see him," Sari said, her focus absolute, activating the tendrils from the surface of a nearby asteroid. What looked like massive, dormant vines suddenly lashed out, wrapping around the flanking ship's hull. They weren't trying to crush it. They were delivering a massive bioelectric shock. The raider's systems shorted out in a spectacular display of sparks, and it drifted, powerless. The third raider, realizing the trap, turned to flee. "They're running," Kellen said, a surge of relief washing over him. "No," Sari said, her voice cold. "They're not." She looked at him, and for the first time, the playful mask was completely gone, replaced by a flinty resolve. "They've seen Viridia. They've seen what we can do. If they get away, they'll bring back a fleet. We can't let that happen." She input a final, grim command. A section of the asteroid field that had seemed empty detonated silently, releasing a cloud of microscopic, self-replicating nanites that swarmed the fleeing ship, dismantling its drive core at a molecular level. Within minutes, it was just another piece of drifting debris. The bridge was silent. The threat was neutralized. Utterly. Kyle stared at Sari, his heart hammering for a different reason now. This wasn't the flirty gardener he'd dismissed. This was a warrior, a strategist of terrifying efficiency. He had spent his life running from fights, believing survival was the only victory. She had just shown him that sometimes the only way to protect your home is to stand your ground and be the most dangerous thing in the room. Sari took a deep breath, the hardness in her eyes softening back into her usual wry amusement. "See, gardening." She nudged his shoulder with hers. "You're not bad with those sensors, runner." For a rookie, the old nickname would have stung before. Now, it felt like a challenge. He looked from her to the view screen, to the peaceful, verdant station they had just defended with such ferocity. He had always seen the galaxy as a place to escape from. Sari and all of Viridia saw it as a place to put down roots. And for the first time, Kellen understood that the deepest roots weren't grown in soft soil, but forged in steel, and they were willing to fight like hell to protect the ground they held. The silence in the Starlight's Lament's mess hall was heavier than any gravity well. The immediate danger had passed, but it had been replaced by a looming, monumental choice. The ship was repaired, more than repaired. It was reborn, its systems integrated with Viridia's biotech, its hull woven with self-healing fibers, its sensors alive with a new, organic awareness. It was ready to fly further and faster than ever before, but the question hung in the air. Unspoken yet deafening, flight aware. Captain Ilya stood before his assembled crew, his hands clasped behind his back. Anya stood slightly apart, a quiet, steady presence, representing the other side of the choice. "The ship is ready," Ilya began, his voice echoing in the hushed room. "We have our freedom back. Our original mission was to reach the far colonies, to deliver our cargo and secure a new contract. It is a path we know. It is what we are." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his people, the engineers, the navigators, the security team. He saw the weariness in their eyes, but also a new, unfamiliar spark. He saw Kellen, who wasn't fidgeting for once, but standing tall beside Sari, their shoulders almost touching. He saw Alara, who was not looking at him, but out of viewport at the lush, green curve of Viridia, her fingers gently tracing the edge of the pot holding her starlight bloom, which now stood proud and vibrant, its silver-speckled leaves open wide to the light. "But we are not who we were," Ilya continued. his voice softening. "We have been offered something else. Not just refuge, but a partnership, a home. Viridia has offered us a place not as guests, but as founders, to help them build a new kind of community here. One that stands as a beacon against the darkness we have known." It was the moment of decision. The nomadic life of the starfarer, a known quantity of struggle and solitude, versus the terrifying, beautiful prospect of putting down roots. Elara was the first to move. She didn't say a word. She simply picked up her plant, walked over to Julian, who stood by the door, and placed the pot firmly in his hands. It was not a gesture of relinquishment, but one of trust, of shared custody. "A promise, I'm staying," she said, her voice clear and sure, the cynicism gone, replaced by a quiet conviction. "My home was taken from me once. I won't help build another one just to abandon it. There is life here, real life. I want to help it grow." One by one, the others made their choice. The chief engineer, a pragmatic woman who had scoffed at the plant magic, announced she was staying to study the biofusion reactors. The navigator, an old man who had charted 1,000 stars, said he was tired of mapping the void and wanted to learn the geography of a single, living world. Kaelian looked at Sari, at the challenge and the promise in her eyes. He thought of running, of the cold, empty silence between stars. Then he thought of standing his ground, of fighting for something more than just survival. "I'm not running anymore," he said, his voice firm. "I'm staying." Finally, all eyes turned to Captain Ilya. The weight of command, which he had carried alone for so long, felt different now. It was not a burden to be borne, but a choice to be made with his crew, his family. He looked at Anya, and in her eyes, he saw not a demand, but an invitation, an open door. "A captain's first duty is to his crew," Ilya said, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer contain. "And it seems my crew has chosen their home." He walked towards Anya, stopping before her. "The Starlight's lament will stay. We will stay, if you'll have us." Anya's smile was like the dawn after a long night. "We've already planted a section of the new grove for you. We were hoping you'd say yes." The change was not instantaneous, but it was profound. The Starlight's lament was not decommissioned. It became the heart of Viridia's fledgling fleet, its hull now serving as a trellis for new, spacefaring vines. The crew traded their uniforms for practical Viridian gear, their skills merging with the station's unique technologies. They were no longer refugees or visitors. They were builders, gardeners. Weeks later, Alara stood with Julian in the new, expanded biodome, their hands buried in the rich, dark soil as they planted the first saplings of a hybrid orchard. Her starlight bloom, now thriving, sat on a nearby rock, its glow a gentle beacon. She wasn't just repairing things anymore. She was creating. Julian's single quotes as hand brushed against hers, not by accident. She didn't pull away. The touch was warm, solid, and real. He didn't need to say anything. The language they spoke now was written in the turning of the seasons, in the unfurling of a new leaf, in the quiet, steady work of building a future together. They had come to the outpost for repairs, expecting spare parts and a quick departure. In return, Viridia had given them upgrades, not just to their ship, but to their very souls. They had given them coffee that tasted like hope, a war fleet grown from thorns and will, and most importantly, a reason to stop running. They had given them a home, and in doing so, they had built a new constellation in the vast, dark sky, a single point of light that refused to go out.